near a secluded mountain homestay. A bizarre murder occurred. A strong male traveler was hit on the head with a dumbbell and died in the clock tower near the homestay. Due to the heavy snow, all roads from the homestay and the clock tower to outside were covered by ice and snow before and after the crime, and were impassable. Therefore, the murderer was among these 6 people in the inn. The problem is that 6 of the 7 suspects all have perfect alibis. Only a 15-year-old junior high school student had no alibi at the time of the crime. Could this seemingly childish teenager be the murderer? In this episode, I will continue to update a series of destroying alibis. The story begins with a mountain lodge in Yamanashi Prefecture, Japan. That day, Mei Xing, the manager of the search section of Nio Prefectural Police, came to the guest house alone for vacation. But as soon as she checked in, she encountered a blizzard. Snow and ice quickly blocked the road to the mountain. Mei Xing and the other 4 tourists were trapped in the guest house. The original travel plan was thus stranded. Considering that someone would die soon, let's quickly get to know. At this time, there are 7 people in the homestay, except for the middle-aged couple who run the homestay, Su Boss and Su Madam, and Officer Meekson. The other 4 are a slightly fat, a kind-looking male programmer, Fei Yuan with long hair, Miss Hue, a passionate female staff in the company, in his 30s, a man who doesn't like to communicate with others, Amo, who is only 15 years old, Hao Chu, a junior high school boy who always dreams of being a police, Mei Xin and he. These 4 tourists were all here for the first time, and they didn't know each other. At dinner that day, all 5 guests gathered on the first floor of the homestay. During the meal, Mei Xing, Fei Yuan, Hui Ji and Hao Chu, Meekxing, Fai Yuan, and Hui talked more. Mei Xing, Fei Yuan and Hui Ji were curious why Hao Chu came here alone without an adult, and came here for a vacation alone. Hao Chu explained that his parents worked abroad all year round. He has been dependent on his grandmother since childhood. Last winter, Hao Chu's grandmother passed away suddenly. Since then, Hao Chu often comes alone. Hao Chu's grandmother loved food very much. She once heard that the owner of this homestay, Mrs. Su, was a master chef. But unfortunately, the old lady never had the chance and passed away. Kiao Chu hoped to replace his grandmother, to taste the food made by Mrs. Su. So she took the opportunity of winter vacation, came here alone. While the 4 were chatting, the solitary male traveler Amu at the next table was eating by himself and habitually rubbed the knife and fork in his hand, rubbing and colliding with each other, creating a series of harsh noises. Mi Jing and the others were disturbed by the noise. They lost interest in chatting, so they had to eat in silence. After dinner, bored Meekson called Hao Chu to her room on the 2nd floor of the homestay and planned to continue chatting with him. Meekson didn't reveal his police identity just now, only saying that he was an ordinary civil servant. When he was alone with Hao Chu, he told him the truth about his occupation and shared with the junior high school student, shared his experience of applying to the police academy. Hao Chu, who always dreamed of being a police officer, Hao Chu felt about every word Meekson said. They talked until 11 o'clock at night. Meekson unconsciously stood up and led Hao Chu to the window to relax. The blizzard outside had stopped at this moment. The world was covered with thick snow. The scenery was beautiful. In order to enjoy the snow scene outside more clearly, Meekson casually turned off the lights in the room. While Meekson and Hao Chu were enjoying the snow through the window, enjoying the snow peacefully, they accidentally saw the outlier male passenger, Amu, was hurriedly walking through the snow towards a clock tower, a bell tower more than 20 meters away, and hurried away. He stopped and looked back from time to time, as if to confirm if anyone was following him. After entering the open door of the clock tower, he immediately closed the door. What was he doing inside? Mijing and Hao Xu couldn't help but be curious. Why did Amo go to the clock tower so stealthily so late? Was he trying to steal something? However, They quickly denied this guess. Because the owner, Boss Sue and Mrs. Sue, introduced before dinner, the clock tower behind the homestay had been abandoned. It's usually used to store some miscellaneous items. There shouldn't be any valuables inside. Mei Jing and Hao Chu thought Amo's behavior was suspicious, but Mei Xin and Hao Chu didn't think much of it. After all, they were not familiar with Amo. There was no need to care about his private affairs. Hao Chu saw that it was already late at night. He said goodbye to Mixin and went back to his room to rest. After he left, Mixin stood alone by the window again, enjoying the snow outside for a while. Until around 11:10. He closed the curtains. During this period, a Meng never came out of the middle building. After closing the curtains, Mixin lay on the bed to sleep. But she wasn't sleepy at all. After lying in bed for 4 minutes, he temporarily decided to go downstairs for a drink. As soon as she walked out of the room, he bumped into the programmer Faiyuan who lived opposite. Mixin casually greeted him. Faiyuan also couldn't sleep and planned to go downstairs for a walk. Mixin invited him to have a drink with her. Faiyuan agreed. When they arrived at the restaurant, they saw the owner of the homestay, Sue, and the female guest sister Hui were gathered here drinking and chatting. Mei Xin and Fei Yuan each poured a glass of wine and joined them. The 5 people drank and chatted and had a great time. They didn't go back to their rooms until 12 o'clock at night. The next morning, Sue and his wife and other guests got up, went downstairs for breakfast, but Amo was nowhere to be seen. When Boss Sue went upstairs to Amo's room to invite him to have breakfast together, but found the door slightly open, but found it empty. Then, Boss Sue went downstairs, asked the other guests if anyone had seen Amo. Everyone shook their heads. Mi Jing, with her police intuition, she had an ominous feeling. She immediately told Sue about what she saw last night, sneaking into the bell tower in a mysterious manner, and told Boss Sue the truth. Then Sue and Mei Xin to check the situation of the clock tower behind. As soon as they reached the back door of the homestay, they saw on the snow outside there were 3 sets of footprints clearly imprinted. The 3 sets of footprints extended from the back door to the clock tower more than 20 meters away. Judging from the size and pattern of the footprints, these 3 sets of footprints should belong to 2 people. Mixin and Boss Sue didn't have time to think much. They went straight to the gate of the bell tower. When they pushed open the slightly open door, they found Amo lying on the ground with a bloody head and had no breath. A blood-stained dumbbell was placed beside the body, which looked like the murder weapon. Boss Sue hurriedly called the police. But the homestay is located in the deep mountains. Yesterday's heavy snow blocked the roads up and down the mountain. When the police cleared the snow on the road and arrived, it would take at least 2 hours. Mei Jin had to tell everyone in the homestay, revealed his identity as a police officer, and the crime scene and its surroundings for a simple investigation. There were not many clues in the bell tower, except for the 3 sets of footprints just found. There were no suspicious footprints on the snow, left no suspicious traces. Thus, the murderer must have gone from the homestay to the clock tower. In other words, the murderer of Amo must be among the people currently at the homestay. If the 3 sets of footprints from the back door, named footprint A and footprints B and C, then footprint A was left by a pair of 40-size men's shoes, and the direction is from the back door of the homestay to the clock tower. Footprints B and C were both left by a pair of 40-size men's shoes, but the directions of the 2 are just opposite. Footprint B is from the homestay to the clock tower, and trace C is from the clock tower to the homestay. Mixin confirmed through comparison, confirmed that the deceased Amo wore size 40 men's shoes, and the sole pattern matched footprint A completely. So the situation is clearer. The murderer wore men's shoes in size 42. The murderer returned to the inn after killing Amo. So there are 2 sets of footprints on the snow. It's worth noting that footprints A and B from the homestay to the clock tower. There is an overlapping area at the gate of the clock tower. and footprint B was clearly stepped on top of footprint A. This shows that the owner of footprint A, that is, the deceased Amo, should have arrived at the clock tower earlier than the murderer. Mei Jing and Hao Zhu saw Mu enter the bell tower at 11 o'clock last night. At 11 o'clock at night. Then Hao Chu left Mei Xing's room. Mei Xing closed the curtains at 11:10. Went downstairs to drink with Fei Yuan and others, so it can be basically determined that Amu was killed after 11:10 last night. In addition, the host Su, through careful observation of footprints B and C, confirmed that these two sets of footprints were left by a pair of 42 size men's rain shoes. These rain boots, usually placed in the hallway at the back door of the inn. Along with the rain boots, there was a pair of dumbbells. One of the dumbbells was later abandoned by the murderer at the crime scene, which should be the murder weapon that killed Amo. After listening to the clues provided by Boss Su, she guessed that the murderer was worried about leaving footprints on the snow, and expose his identity. So, he deliberately changed into the rain boots to commit the crime. After initially reviewing the crime process, Mixin verified the shoe sizes of everyone in the homestay. The result shows that Su wore size 42 shoes. Mixin and the programmer Fei Yuan wore size 40 shoes. Mrs. Su and Ahua both wore size 37 shoes. Junior high school student Hao Chu wore size 38 shoes. That is to say, the 6 people currently in the homestay can all wear the pair of 42 size men's rain boots. 42 size men's rain shoes that left to footprints. Simply put, that is to say, everyone may be the murderer of Amo. Mixin was just analyzing this. The local police had cleared the road up and down the mountain. Arrived at the homestay. The forensics preliminary autopsy results show that Amu was indeed killed by a dumbbell hitting his head. But no suspicious fingerprints were found on the dumbbell. Left no suspicious fingerprints. The murderer either wore gloves or cleaned up the scene after killing him. In addition, the forensic doctor determined that was between 11 and 12 o'clock last night. According to Mixing's eyewitness testimony, Amu entered the bell tower at 11 o'clock last night. No one else entered the clock tower between 11 and 11:10. So, the murderer entered the bell tower after 11:10. In this case, the time of Amu's death can be further narrowed down to between 11:10 and 12 o'clock last night. During this period, the owner of the homestay, Su, Mrs. Su and the female tenant Hue were drinking and chatting in the restaurant on the first floor. All have clear alibis. According to the testimony of these 3 people, they gathered together at 10:30 last night. Mi Jing left her room at 11:14 and met Fei Yuan, who lived opposite her, in the hallway. And they went downstairs together and joined Su Boss and Hue in the restaurant. The 5 of them stayed together until midnight. Until 12 o'clock at night. Mei Jing, as a police officer and the protagonist of the story, couldn't be the murderer. Among the 5 people who were drinking and chatting, the only one with time to commit the crime was Fei Yuan. But he only had 4 minutes to commit the crime. Mixin closed the curtains at 11:10 that night, and then lay in the room for 4 minutes. If Fei Yuan was the murderer, he must be after 11:10. Quickly from the back door of the homestay, run to the clock tower more than 20 meters away, and use dumbbells to kill Amo. After cleaning up the scene, then he ran back to the homestay, changed the rain boots on his feet for his own shoes, and then run upstairs, walked to the door of his room. And at around 11:14, he calmly met Mixin, who came out of the room. Met in the hallway. This is almost impossible. Moreover, the 3 rows of footprints on the snow were clear, without any traces of running, so Fei Yuan's suspicion can be basically ruled out. Now, the 15-year-old junior high school student Hao Chu became the only suspect in killing Amo. Facing the local police's questioning, Hao Chu claimed that around 11:10 that night, he left Mixin's room. He went back to his room to rest. He didn't go out again all night. However, his statement There was no time witness to confirm it. So he became the only one of the 6 people in the homestay. The only one without a clear alibi. However, Mi Jing firmly refused to believe that the 15-year-old boy in front of her would be the murderer. What's more, the deceased Amo was a strong and healthy adult. It was extremely difficult for Hao Chu to surprise him. At this point, Mi Jing decided to find evidence to clear Hao Chu of the suspicion of murder. But just then, when the local police verified the identity of the deceased, they found a clue that was extremely unfavorable to Hao Chu. The deceased Amo was a fugitive fraudster. Last year, underwent a radical plastic surgery, and he used a fake identity when registering at the homestay. Hao Chu's grandmother was cheated of her life savings by Amo a year ago, and finally couldn't bear the heavy blow and committed suicide. Since then, Hao Chu had to live alone at the age of 15. It can be said that Amo has caused great harm to Hao Chu. Hao Chu has every reason to hate him. In view of this, despite Hao Chu's constant defense, she claimed that she didn't recognize Amu or killed anyone. But the local police still decided to bring him back to the police station for trial. Finally, under Mei Xing's repeated pleas, the police officers postponed taking Hao Chu away and gave Mei Xing a 1-day deadline. If Mei Jin couldn't find clues to clear Hao Chu's suspicion, failed to find clues to clear Hao Chu of suspicion, the police could only temporarily detain Hao Chu after getting a 1-day deadline from the local police. She pondered over the case for a long time, but she couldn't think of a good excuse for Hao Chu. In desperation, he had to asked her landlord Shi Nai for help. Shi Nai runs a watch store. She had helped Mixin solve many murder mysteries. The alibi forged by the murderer in the case. After receiving Mixin's call, she immediately took a car to the homestay. Mixin then, Shi Nai, told Shanae in detail the whole case. After listening to Mixin, she couldn't figure out the clues for a moment, so he could only find a room to stay. The next morning, he got up and came to the window. While looking out the window, and reorganized the case in his mind. The window of the room was facing the clock tower. Through the window, he could clearly see 3 sets of footprints from the back door to the clock tower. These 3 sets of footprints were left by the murderer and Amo. It was these 3 sets of footprints which made Shi Nai suddenly understand. Shi Li figured out the murderer's identity and the truth of the case. Then he called Mixin to his room and told her his reasoning. Shi Nai thought that the key clue to solving the case was hidden in the 3 sets of footprints on the snow. At 11 o'clock that night, Mixin and her uncle saw Amu walked towards the clock tower furtively and stopped to look back from time to time, as if to confirm if anyone was following him. Mixin previously identified footprint A, which was the only one with 40-yard men's shoes. The set of footprints belonged to the deceased Amo. However, but the housewife, after careful observation, she found that every footprint in footprint A showed no signs of stopping. But the footprints B left by 42 size rain boots had multiple footprints with traces of stopping. Based on this, came to a conclusion contrary to Mei Xin. She thinks the footprints are left by 40 size men's shoes. Footprints are from the back door of the homestay to the clock tower. And the footprints left by 42 size rain boots. And the footprints C from the clock tower to the back door were all left by the murderer. The footprints left by the 42 size rain boots. Footprints from the back door of the homestay to the clock tower. Footprint B is the one left by the victim Amo. On his way to the clock tower, stopped and looked back many times. So footprint B has obvious signs of stopping. Simply put, the murderer changed his shoes before and after the crime. He wore size 40 men's shoes, walked from the back door of the homestay to the clock tower. Then, after killing Amo in the bell tower, he exchanged his 40 size men's shoes and the 42 size rain shoes that Amo wore. Finally, he returned to the inn in 42 size rain boots. Mei Xing previously judged that footprint A came from the deceased Amo, and footprint B belonged to the murderer. At the gate of the bell tower, there was an overlapping area of 2 sets of footprints, and footprint B was clearly pressed on top of footprint A. Mei Xing thus concluded that the victim Amo arrived at the clock tower earlier. But the actual situation was the opposite. The murderer had already been lurking in the bell tower before Amo arrived at the clock tower, had already been lurking inside the clock tower. Hao Chu was with Mixin at that time, and they saw Amo sneaking towards the clock tower. In that case, the murderer lurking in the bell tower could not be Hao Chu. In the same way, from 10:30 p.m. to 12 a.m. on the night of the crime, the boss and his wife, who were always together, and the female tenant's sister Hui, could be completely ruled out as suspects. In this way, the person who had time to kill Amo could only be before 11 o'clock that night. Programmer Fei Yuan, who had no alibi. However, it's suspected that Fei Yuan didn't intentionally kill Amo. The situation may be the opposite. Amo intended to kill Fei Yuan. Perhaps they were old acquaintances. Fei Yuan recognized Amo as a fraudster. Amo was worried that he would be exposed, so he had the idea of killing him. After dinner on the day of the crime, Amo should have made an excuse to meet Fei Yuan. To meet at the clock tower at 11 o'clock. Fei Yuan arrived at the clock tower on time before 11. Waiting for Amo. At 11 o'clock, Amo. He hurried to the clock tower with a mysterious look. In order to kill Fei Yuan, to leave no clues pointing to himself, he deliberately changed into plastic board, the 42 size rain boots on the porch at the door, and brought a dumbbell that was placed with the rain boots. On the way to the clock tower, Amo looked back from time to time. He was worried that his crime would be discovered. Unexpectedly, Mixin and Hao Chu turned off the lights in the room. Turned off the lights in the guest room. Stood by the window and looked outside, so Amo didn't notice that they saw him. What Amo didn't expect was that when he intended to attack Fei Yuan in the bell tower, Fei Yuan resisted and took the dumbbell to kill him. After killing Fei Yuan, he hurriedly wiped off the fingerprints on the dumbbell and prepared to flee the scene. At this moment, he suddenly realized a fatal problem. As long as he stepped out of the bell tower, he would leave his footprints on the snow. At that time, the police will easily find him. In a hurry, Sui Yuan noticed that Amo was wearing were the rain boots that Boss Su left at the back door. So he quickly thought of a plan. He swapped his 40 size men's shoes with the rain boots. Finally, he returned to the homestay in rain boots. Then he put the rain boots back in the hallway. He put on the slippers left by Amo at the entrance. He went upstairs and went back to his room to calm down. But before he could enter the room, he met Mei Xing at the door of the room. Fei Yuan lied to Mei Xing that he couldn't sleep and was about to go out for a walk. Then he went to the restaurant downstairs with Mei Xing and joined Boss Su. The chat of Boss Su, Mrs. Su and Sister Hui. And because of Mei Xing's judgment, Fei Yuan accidentally created a perfect alibi for himself. Just after the housewife finished her reasoning, there was a commotion downstairs. It turned out that several local police officers arrived again to take the pig away. Mei Xin hurried downstairs in front of the police officers, repeated Shinai's reasoning just now. Fei Yuan was glad that the police didn't find out that he was involved. Hearing Mixin's reasoning, he felt his heart sink. He confessed his crime on the spot. According to Fei Yuan's confession, he and Amo were high school classmates who hadn't seen each other. When he first saw Amo at the homestay, Fei Yuan felt that Amo looked familiar. However, because Amo had plastic surgery and his appearance differed greatly from before, Fei Yuan didn't dare to recognize him until dinner that day. Amo habitually rubbed the knife and fork in his hand, which made a harsh noise. Fei Yuan. He finally confirmed. The silent middle-aged man in front of him was his long-lost classmate. So after dinner, he couldn't help testing Amu's identity, which alerted the guilty Amu, which brought him to his death. Later, the situation at the crime scene was basically consistent with Xinai's inference. Mei Jing and several police officers listened to Fei Yuan's confession. Were all very heavy-hearted. If Fei Yuan had surrendered Amo immediately after killing him, perhaps his actions would be judged by the judge as self-defense and would not bear any legal responsibility. But after killing, he tried to hide the truth and forged an alibi and other actions. He must bear the corresponding legal responsibility. The case has come to this point. The truth has finally come to light. But Mei Xing still has a doubt in her mind. That is, as a fugitive fraudster. Why still have the mood to come to this mountain homestay for vacation? For this, Fei Yuan gave his own guess. According to him, Amu was already in high school. A real foodie. He loved to walk the streets and taste various foods. He probably heard that the landlady of the homestay, Mrs. Su, is a great cook, so he couldn't resist his appetite and came here to satisfy his appetite. See you next time.